Hello there, this is Dr. Aditi, and today we're talking about the anatomy of the skull. We're going to go over a myriad of features of the skull, from structures, foraminas, passages, prominences, all that. Now, the best way to learn this information is actually a hands-on approach, right? So if you have a model of a skull, because of course we all have models of skulls just laying around our house, use that. Well, to be fair, when I first started learning, I did purchase a whole box of anatomy bones because I'm a hands-on learner, so that really helped me. But you don't obviously have to have one. You can also just print out a picture of the skull in different purviews and follow along that way, and then you're tracing and writing as we go. That's another kinesthetic approach. The other thing you can do if you have don't have access to either of those at this moment, use your own body, right? You've got a skull. Imagine that. Handy enough. It's right on you. So you can just use your own body to do that too. Now, the other thing I'm going to give you in this episode is mnemonics to remember the skull, because there are 22 bones that you have to remember. So mnemonics do sort of help things out there. And then lastly, of course, we will do a mind map to sort of summarize everything and bring it all together. So let's get cracking. Right, so the first thing you need to know is that the skull has 22 bones. Now, 8 of those are in your brain case, which is the neurocranium, and then 14 of those are actually your facial bones, right? Now, all these bones tend to be either paired or singular. And it's important to know which is which, obviously. Now, the good thing about that is less names that you have to remember, but you do need to know which ones are paired and which ones are not. So let's look at the viscerocranium right here. Every bone is going to be paired except 2. The vomer, which is in your nasal cavity in there, and your mandible, which is right here. These are not paired, they're singular, right? Everything else in the viscerocranium is going to be paired. Now, let's look at the neurocranium. And in order to learn or memorize the bones of the neurocranium, I want you to use this mnemonic, which is called step off. S will be for your sphenoid bone, which is in there, that green sticker you see with the S on it. And that's just going to be one bone. And you're like, well, how is it one bone? Because you can see it in both orbits. Well, because it sort of spans across in the middle of the skull. I sort of think of it like the equator of the skull. It's inside and it spans across. So it's only one bone. Now, the next letter, which is T, is for temporal, and that, as you know, is going to be on both sides, right? Both sides of your temple. So those are going to be 2 bones. The next one, E, is for ethmoid, which is in here. It's sort of like where your tear duct is. It's going to be in that area. That's your ethmoid bone, and there's only one again, because this one is also a bone that's sort of in the middle of your skull. It sort of it starts in the middle and it spans out a little bit, so there's only one bone. And then we've got 2 parietal bones, which are on top right here, right on top of your head. And then occipital, there's only one, and that's going to be in the back. And then of course 1 frontal, which is right here. There we go. So there you have it. There's your mnemonic for all the neurocranium bones. All right, let's dig deeper. Let's talk sutures. Sutures are fibrous connective tissue joints that basically connect 2 bony plates together, and they are synarthrosis joints, meaning that they have some mobility that they offer. And the unique thing about sutures is they are pliable during birth, and then as we age they become more rigid because they ossify and they provide us more protection. So during birth we need that pliability, right, to get through the birth canal, and then later on we need more protection, and so they sort of evolve with the human needs, I guess. Okay, so what are the names of the sutures? Now, I have a mnemonic for you on the screen, and it's going to be the lazy cat sleeps safely. So the or the is not the first letter of the suture because there's only 4. So that's just for being grammatically correct. And lazy is the first suture we're going to identify, and that's your lambdoid suture, which is in the back. It sort of separates the parietal bones from the occipital bone. Okay, the next one is CAT, which you've probably guessed is coronal suture. Now, this one separates the frontal bone with the back parietal bones, okay? And then we've got the next one, which is going to be your sagittal suture. Again, this, remember from your anatomical positions, it divides the body into left and right. So it's going to go right over the top here, and it's dividing the 2 parietal bones along midline. Then lastly, we've got the squamous suture, which basically connects the parietal and temporal bones. Okay, so those are your sutures. And let's move on to the next set of bones. This is the anterior view of Simon, our model skull. We're going to just take a peek at all the key features. So across here you have the coronal suture, and then of course the frontal bone. Glabella is this sort of area between your eyebrows, and if you know anybody Indian, you will see that Indian women tend to wear the sticker right here as a fashion accessory, and that's actually on the glabella. Okay, then we've got the orbital foramen here, which is called the supraorbital foramen, and then the supraorbital margin, which has muscle attachments to it. Inside the orbit, you've got the sphenoid bone back here, frontal bone here, zygomatic, ethmoid bone, lacrimal, and maxilla. And then in back here, you may be able to see the palatine bone, but it's just a little smidgen there. So maxilla extends all the way here, and we've got some alveolar processes. And here we have the joining of the zygomatic and the maxilla, and this right here is called the infraorbital foramen. Okay, now nasal bone is going to be right there, and if you look inside the nasal cavity, you've got a perpendicular plate, and then you've got the vomer bone down here. And then on either side, you've got these little protrusions, which are actually nasal concha. So we've got the middle and the inferior nasal concha that you can see. All right. Then we've got, of course, this is the maxilla, alveolar processes of maxilla, and the mandible. And this thing right here, this is going to be the mental foramen. Okay. All right, I think we've covered everything. That's it. And the mnemonic for the anterior aspect of the skull is going to be Fancy Nancy eats very modest meals. So we start at the top and we work our way down. So the very top is going to be frontal, Fancy for frontal, Nancy is going to be your nasal bone, Eats is your ethmoid bone, which is actually seen in your orbit right there. It's off a little bit. And then you've got V, which is vomer. It's going to be in your nasal cavity. And modest is from maxilla, which is right there. And meals is for mandible, which is right there. So there you go. Fancy Nancy eats very modest meals. Let's take a look at the right lateral view of the skull and highlight some of the landmarks and bones. Okay, so here we've got the frontal bone, coronal suture, parietal bone. This red one here is going to be your squamous suture, temporal bone, right? And then we've also got the zygomatic bone. And here we've got the squamous temporal area. And then this indentation here is your external acoustic meatus. The blue one right there, hopefully you can see that, is the lambdoid suture. Then you've got this sort of mastoid portion, styloid process because it looks like a stylo, like a pen, right? And then you've also got the actual mastoid process, which is this little, and you can actually feel that quite easily. Occipital bone's going to be back there. Mandible, you're aware of that. And then we've got this area here. It sort of juts out just a tad, your chin area. That's the mental protuberance of the mandible. Okay? Now I want you to look at this sort of articulation here. This is two landmarks. First is going to be the mandibular fossa, and then it's going to be this tubercle, which is called the articular tubercle. Now looking in a little bit on this side, we've got the maxilla, and remember the alveolar process is going to be right there too, and then zygomatic, right? And then, yes, the nasal bone. Now you won't be able to see much inside the nasal bone, but you can see that this is the maxilla, and then here is the nasal bone. Now, in looking inside the orbit somewhat, you're going to be able to see the lacrimal bone. This is actually the lacrimal fossa. This is the entire bone. And then behind that, we've got the ethmoid bone, right? And the rest is a bit technical to see, but you will be able to see the frontal and, of course, the maxilla. Okay, going back up here, remember these are the sutures. So we've got the coronal suture, and then we've also got the squamous suture. But there's another little portion between the two that connects the two sutures, and this is actually one of the most fragile parts of the bone. It's very prone to injury because everything sort of joins here, all the bones meet here. So this is called the pterion, and you can see it forms like an H, right there. So that is a very sensitive area of our skull, a fragile area, and again it's called the pterion. And I think that is all we have for the lateral purview. Let's have a quick peek at the cranial fossa. This one's super easy because there's only 3, and basically fossa means ditch or trench, right? So it's going to be a depression, and it's an area which houses specific parts of your brain. So the first one is the anterior cranial fossa, which is going to be in yellow, and you can see it in a superior view but also in a lateral view on the bottom. Then we've got the middle cranial fossa, again pretty self-explanatory, that's going to be in pink, and you again can see it in a lateral purview. And then of course lastly, posterior cranial fossa. So fairly easy to remember and memorize. Just remember that fossa means trench or dip, so that might cue you in too. Okay, now we're finally ready for our mind map because there was a lot to cover, right? The skull obviously is one of the most complex aspects of our body, and the anatomical features, there's so many. That's why this mind map is loaded. It's loaded with mnemonics and lots of key features that you need to know. So use this as a study guide. Print it out and jot down things that you need, because you have all the mnemonics in one place to really memorize some of the aspects. And don't forget, if you can get a model of a skull, get it from the library and get some pipe cleaners and use those to really figure out different foraminas, because that's really going to help you from a hands-on kinesthetic learning perspective. Again, comment below if you found this helpful, or if there's anything else you'd like me to add to this topic, and I will see you next week. Bye bye now.